Welcome to this session titled Somewhere, a Place for Us, Personal, Societal, and Institutional Changes for Orthodox Women in America and Israel. I'm Rachel Shtern. I'll be moderating the session today. I work for Jewish Federations of North America in the Department of Education and Engagement, and we actually ask this question all the time, but mostly about North American Jews. Who are North American Jews? What does identity mean in the 21st century? We're going to kind of look at that through the lens of Orthodoxy, modern Orthodoxy, and women today.
So I'm really delighted to be here with you to share with you some of the facts which are revealed by a number of recent studies of American Jews and Israeli Jews, most recently by the Pew Foundation, which has looked both at American Jews and Israeli Jews, and actually has a whole paper on Orthodox Jews. This has made things very simple for those of us who are specifically interested in Orthodox Jews, who are often excluded from demographic studies, if you've ever noticed the articles which say, except for the Orthodox. So fortunately, we're now in a situation where we can actually look at the extraordinary changes in the lives of Orthodox women. The expectations of both women and men have changed. Changed from what? Changed from what they were, say, 30, 40 years ago. Some of the primary changes are that women now work through most of their adult lives, including Orthodox women. Marriage is often later than it was in previous generations. Some modern Orthodox Jews may openly live LGBTQ lives, and in general, that population is more prominent and people are more aware of Jews who have that sexual orientation. Some women become single mothers by choice. This is actually something which is particularly pronounced again in the Orthodox community, and it's something which we started noticing on a more impressionistic basis, I would say about 30 years ago, maybe a little more. When I first started mentioning it to my demographic colleagues, their response to me was, well, it doesn't show up statistically, so it's not happening. Now it's showing up statistically. This is, I think, even though it's not a sweeping trend, it's a significant trend which says something about changed expectations. Modern Orthodox families in the United States especially often need both spouses or both partners' salaries in order to make ends meet. And this goes along with a whole constellation of changes having to do with economics as well as changed gender roles. And it's particularly evident in the modern Orthodox community, which is one of the things that I want to talk about in a minute. That goes with the next item, which is that day school tuition is often a motivator for women's careers. You wouldn't think there was that connection, but there is. A part of that constellation is that sometimes women are making more money than men are. There were all kinds of dire predictions several decades ago for what would happen in families where that was true. As I'll talk about a little bit more, actually these dire predictions have not come to fruition. It seems to be working out just fine. Child care and household care are often shared or outsourced. And in the spiritual and Jewish realms, there are changing gender role expectations also. Orthodox girls and Orthodox mothers often are pursuing extensive Jewish education. It's a lifelong expectation. Women are involved in chavrutot and in learning groups in ways that they weren't, and the expectation about public expressions of Judaism, as we heard this morning in the plenary very, very movingly, have gone from something which was aspirational to something which is now considered normative. What is not often talked about in these settings is the fact that that lack of exclusivity in certain realms has caused men to back off of interest in Jewish activities. This is something which is not as evident in the Orthodox world, but it is evident in certain circles. So it's more likely to show up, for example, in a partnership minyan setting than it is in a more conventional setting. I don't know that we're going to get to talking about that today, but I do feel responsible to mention that that's also something which is happening. I do want to talk just a little bit about how we got here, starting with the idea that modern Orthodoxy is kind of poised on the cusp. Modern Orthodox Jews in general and modern Orthodox women especially share something with their more Haredi sisters, and they share something with their non-Orthodox sisters. So what's more like the non-Orthodox? Educational levels. The educational levels, secular educational levels of Orthodox women are right up there. They are virtually identical to those of non-Orthodox women. People are always surprised to hear this, but it's been going on now in the 1990 National Jewish Population Survey, in the year 2000 National Jewish Population Survey, in the 2013 Pew Study. Modern Orthodox Jewish women have educational levels and career achievements which are at least equal to, and in some cases surpass, those of non-Orthodox Jews. Also, one of the things which I would say modern Orthodox Jews sometimes share with their non-Orthodox brothers and sisters is somewhat skeptical attitudes towards conventional authority. Just walk around the JOFA Conference and listen to any session, and you will hear what I am talking about. In an age where people can access the internet, where people can find out what's going on in different communities, what different rabbis are saying, every pulpit rabbi will tell you that this creates an atmosphere of skepticism, so that one cannot assume that one's words will be taken as, you'll excuse the expression, gospel truth. On the other hand, Orthodox Jews, including Orthodox women, are more like Haredi Orthodox in their emphasis on marriage and childbearing as defined personal goals. This is something that has become the disparity between Orthodox and non-Orthodox Jews in terms of marriage and childbearing is something which has become more and more pronounced over the decades. It's much more pronounced now than it used to be, and it's something that I'm going to say a little bit more about. The adherence to the halachic lifestyle requirements. No matter how liberated a modern Orthodox Jewish woman is, when Shabbos is at 3:58, Shabbos is at 3:58, and you don't feel particularly liberated. So that, and it's not an external thing. It's something which, again, we heard in the plenary this morning. It's something which comes from inside. It's an internal, passionate attachment to that aspect of traditional Jewish lifestyles, and it makes people who are Sabbath observant feel like they have more in common in certain ways with other people who are Sabbath observant when Sabbath and holidays rolls around. This creates a tension between the value systems and behavior expectations between the Orthodox and the non-Orthodox lifestyles, but on the other hand, it does something else, which is the rest of the American Jewish community is trying to figure out how can people do modernity and do Judaism. And what modern Orthodox lifestyles provide is a kind of model, especially modern Orthodox women. Now, I know when you're struggling to make sure that everything gets done that needs to get done. It doesn't feel like you're particularly doing it all like really successfully all the time, but the fact is that it is getting done. And both the Jewish piece of it, which one of my graduate students has labeled the third shift, okay? There's work as the first shift, personal life and home life as the second shift, and Jewish is the third shift, especially in America where you're always battling the rest of society. It's getting done in modern Orthodox households, and the fact that it can get done is an important model for the non-Orthodox Jewish world as well, and I think that's something to keep in mind. I wanted to mention that we always should keep in mind also the differences in spiritual and Jewish educational and public Judaism expectations that are also going on in these families, and it makes a difference. Again, in the old days and still in some families, when the wife is the one who puts out the Rice Krispies and the husband has to get to shul by 6:30, that's a very clear division of labor. When both of them want to get to shul, things become more complicated. And I am going to hand over the podium to my colleague, Professor Jerome Chanes, who's going to talk about what some of the institutional responses are to these personal changes.
There was a young lady of title who insisted on wearing a sheitel. She didn't care much for kashrus and such, but the sheitel, said she, now that's vital. The question is, who's wearing the sheitel, and what does it mean in 2017? Sylvia laid out very cogently the expectations, the changes, the numbers, and what I'd like to do in the first instance, before I get to the institutional responses, I was asked to lay out basically a context of who and what we're talking about. In 2 words, the question is, what's Orthodox? Or in 3 words, what's modern Orthodox? The fact is, most American Jews today make no distinction between the black-hatted Haredi, those sectarian Jews who are unfortunately mischaracterized in the New York Times and elsewhere as ultra-Orthodox. Let's drop that locution from our vocabulary. It's kind of revolting. Or for that matter, between one flavor of Orthodoxy and the next. To most American Jews, with all respect to our brothers and sister Jews, we're all obscurantist literalists whose Judaism is an accretion of unthinking, primitive practices. In point of fact, our worlds in Israel and in America, and I'll talk about both in a couple of minutes, are hardly monolithic. So the question is, as I say, let me begin not with what's modern Orthodox, but what's Orthodox. And to tell you the truth, I don't have a clue. 50 years ago, we talked about 3 flavors of Orthodoxy. The modern Orthodox, what was known then as the Yeshiva Welt, today the Yeshivish group, the world of sectarian yeshivas, Torah V'das, Mir, Telz, Chaim Berlin, Lakewood, and so on and so forth, and Hasidim, period. Now, I got to tell you, 50 years ago, those categories didn't work that well, and certainly, they didn't work well in 1957. In 2017, they don't work at all. They're meaningless. My taxonomy is a little cumbersome, but my categories are 6, and I'll explain them briefly. The modern Orthodox, the centrist Orthodox, the yeshiva arena, the world of the yeshivas, what they call yeshivish today, which is very different from what it was 50 years ago and 60 years ago, Hasidim, Chabad, and Satmar. The last 2, by the way, Chabad and Satmar, whatever else they may be, They're not Chassidim. They are Chabad, they are Satmar. Modern Orthodox first. The modern Orthodox of 60 years ago, what was modern Orthodox? And Sylvia hinted at this at the very beginning of her discussion. Let me flesh that out a little bit. The modern Orthodox of 60 and 50 years ago made the point to the rest of the Orthodox world, to the Jewish world in general, in fact, that Orthodoxy was not, what was the locution I used earlier, was not an accretion of unthinking obscurantist practices, but was and is a religion with serious intellectual, textual underpinning. The idea of halakha, which was a concept visited upon the community by the Rav, by Rabbi Soloveitchik. But by the way, when I was a kid, I never heard the word halakha. We used the word din. What's the din? The term halakha, as used by Rabbi Soloveitchik, told us that there was a rational construct defining and informing the world of orthopraxis. Modern Orthodoxy in the 1950s into the 1960s talked not only to the Orthodox, but also to the non-religious Jewish world and to the non-Jewish world as well. What was it all about? I'll sum it up in one sentence. You know, what used to be the motto of Yeshiva University, Torah U'Madad. I don't think it's used anymore, big mistake. It didn't mean, it meant not that the world of the secular and secular study and the general world and the religious, the intellectual and world of religious inquiry not only were not incompatible, but they enhanced each other. That was the idea. Anyway, I don't want to be marich on this, so I'll telescope a large discussion into one sentence, two sentences. Beginning in the mid-60s, stretching into the 70s, 80s, and 90s, two things happened. And these are, many people have written about this. First, religiously, modern Orthodoxy began looking over its right shoulder to the more sectarian world of the yeshivas, of Agudat Yisrael, of Aguda. You know, they're wonderfully observant, they sit and learn, but they send the kids to college. You know. Second, so there was this increasing defensiveness amongst in our modern Orthodox community, and how that played out I'll come to in a second. Second, in terms of interaction with the external world, what we call public affairs, the modern Orthodox began moving in a rightward direction. And that, I'll flesh that out a little bit in terms of the institutional discussion. The result, the overwhelming majority of those we used to call modern Orthodox 50 and 60 years ago are further to the right, both religiously and in terms of public affairs. It's no chiddush here, increasingly conservative on public affairs issues, and on Israel, and of course on religious issues. They became what I call, and to pinch the term first used by Rabbi Lamb many years ago, the centrist Orthodox. The modern Orthodox world of 50 years ago, moderate or liberal on most public affairs issues, church-state, civil rights, Israel, reproductive choice as well, has moved steadily to the right. These are the centrist Orthodox, and most synagogues today, most modern Orthodox synagogues, with all respect to the different shuls that we're all members of, but let's face it, not innovative, a little boring, increasingly conservative with a small c. Now, how did this state of affairs come to be? Historically, Orthodoxy was viewed by the non-Orthodox as oppressive and pre-modern. Today, precisely those characteristics that decades ago were viewed as negatives are at the root of the appeal of many in the centrist Orthodox community. Orthodoxy provides community, it's protective of its adherents, provides certainty in an uncertain world. The sense of certitude, the lack of freedom, viewed as negatives, as abominations in earlier years, are today considered positives and strengths, and they fuel the centrist Orthodox surge. The old modern Orthodox, those of us who viewed intellectual and social inquiry and religious normative values, as I said, as enhancing each other, embattled. So the modern Orthodox world of today is small, beleaguered, and the hegemony of the centrist Orthodox, and today most Orthodox shuls are centrist. The result is the dropping out of the modern in modern Orthodoxy. In the old modern Orthodoxy, the modern got pinched by a conservative public affairs agenda. The Orthodox got pinched by a rightward-looking religious agenda. So the modern Orthodox world of today, and I'll sum up the modern Orthodoxy, and I'll spend a minute on the others. It's the only place in the world in tradition of observance, and we're all sitting here because this is where we are. Interesting, creative things are happening. Today's modern Orthodoxy is what the modern Orthodox world was 60 years ago. And where exciting and innovative questions are raised about and solutions are offered is in this arena, the world of Drisha, Maharat, Rabbi Greenberg, partnership minyanim, JOFA, pushing the envelope in traditional structures of prayer, and so on and so forth. Now, back to the taxonomy, just to complete the taxonomy, the third arena, and I'll just say one sentence about each, the area of the yeshiva world, the yeshivish, to use the contemporary locution, there are major differences. First of all, the Lakewood behemoth, having cannibalized many of the once proud yeshivas in Brooklyn, Torah Vodaas, Mir Chaim, they still exist, they're still very good, but it's all about Lakewood as the finishing school. These yeshivas are the mainstay of the sectarian black hat world. One major difference, by the way, and it's a large discussion again, few students in the yeshiva world, few exceptions, but very few students go to college. 50 years ago, everybody went to college. Even if it was just Brooklyn College at night, I don't care. Today, you have a few going to Turo, a radical departure from 50 years ago. Fourth, the Hasidic community, those identified for the most part in America, in New York. I'll come to you in a minute. Ger, Bobov, one's defined by the fact that the core of their world was the study of and adherence to the writings of Hasidic masters. In other words, they did Hasidus. Hasidus today is more a matter of external appearance and devotional prayer. And finally, the last two, which I'm not going to discuss at all, Chabad and Satmar. Whatever they are, they're not Hasidim, they're Chabad, they're Satmar. About 15, 20 years ago, we were saying that the modern Haredi ratio was approximately 50-50. Today, it's at least two-thirds Haredi. And by Haredi, I mean, what I call, I don't use the term ultra, I use the term, which I borrowed from the late Charles Liebman, the sectarian Orthodox. It's much better characterization. Today, it's at least two-thirds sectarian, one-third modern. And in a few years, if the trend continues, and I'll defer to Sylvia on this in terms of the demographics, I would say it'll be 8-1 or even 10-1. Parallel developments in Israel, but the structures, of course, are completely different. In America, pluralism informs the contouring of denominationalism. In Israel, we're talking about really two institutions, or two clusters of institutions. We used to know as religious Zionism in Israel, and it's an absolutely parallel development. The world of the Mizrahi Party, the NRP, Mafdal, centrist, left of center, moderate, responsible. Similarly, in religious Zionism, the two words which were packed with meaning, the religious part got pinched by the Haredim, where you have today, the Rabbanut been hijacked by some Haredi rabbis, and the Zionism part, very important, is pinched by the settlement movement. Today, Zionism is defined by the settlement movement. That's also a large discussion. We can discuss that, but that's a profound and deep institutional change. And of course, Mafdal, the NRP, amazingly, actually went out of business some years ago. There's no more Mizrahi Party. It was founded in 1902, 1903, whenever, and the result is, many implications of that, of course, is that the Dati Leumi people, what we would call their modern Orthodox, no longer have an institutional home. So where do they go? Some go to the Labor Party, a few go to Meretz. Of course, many, I don't know the numbers, go to Naftali Bennett, Nebuch. In America, the institutional world of YU, the RCA, the OU, what I talked about in the modern Orthodox, that was the central structure of, I'm wrapping up here, of of what we used to know as modern Orthodoxy. And we all know what has happened with YU, with REITs and the base medrash dropping off the deep end, whatever, with all respect to the Rebbeim and REITs. The only thing I'll say that's important to keep in mind about YU, I don't think anybody's written about this, is what I characterize the Haredi light musmachim of REITs are a useful buffer against the larger, very rightward-leaning Haredi world. The only thing I'll say about the Rabbanut, what more is to say about an institution that's been, not to put too fine a point on it, corrupt morally and religiously, financially for decades. But, and our community, we couldn't, what's the tragedy? We could not even get Rav Stav, David Stav elected as the chief rabbi. And he wasn't the greatest, but we couldn't even do that. We know that we're in trouble. The new organizations, look. Mel Brooks used to tell us, look around. So look around. We're in JOFA, but the new organizations, the question for all of us, and this I can't take the time now. Why did Eidah go out of business? But we do have, Drisha, Marat, and Chove, of course. Whatever questions that are raised about Chove, we can discuss that in the discussion period, which is very important. I'll just close with a quotation from my mom, who said at the beginning of the whole thing about when the first iteration of the participation of women, of Jewish women, in the public rituals of the synagogue, who was first being raised, she said, I don't want an aliyah. I want to be an aide.
Thank you so much to everyone. Thank you, Sylvia and Jerry. If you have more questions, find them in the halls because they have answers. And have a great day.
נפחת בי ואתה משמרה בקרבי.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to Jem, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.